By the hoary hosts of Hoggoth! Doctor Strange, let's do this! Hi guys, how's it going? David O'Sullivan here, and in this video I'm giving you my review of Marvel's Doctor Strange. Now, Doctor Strange is the 14th instalment in the ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe that began with Iron Man back in 2008 and is still going strong 8 years later, and here we are, the 14th instalment, Doctor Strange. Who would have thought we'd ever get a Doctor Strange movie? You know, who would have thought we'd ever get an Ant-Man movie, Guardians of the Galaxy, even something like Deadpool over at Fox, but finally we somehow managed to get to a Doctor Strange film, and here we are. Now first off, what I will say is, before I get into my positives and negatives, this isn't one of the best Marvel movies we've ever had. You know, it's not one of the best comic movies ever, it's not one of the best films of the year, but quite frankly, it didn't need to be. You know, for me, I wasn't expecting this to be one of the best Marvel movies ever. I wasn't expecting it to be one of the best films of the year or anything. I just wanted this to be a great Doctor Strange movie, and for me, this film gave me that. It's not one of the best Marvel movies we've ever had, it's not one of the best comic movies either, but is it a great Doctor Strange film? I thought so. Now, getting into the positive side with this film, and I do have a lot more positives than I do negatives, even though there's some things that I didn't think quite worked from this film and didn't think were as good as some other elements. I had a lot more positives than I did negatives, and for me the positives far outweigh the negatives. And for me, one of the best things about this film were the performances. I think the cast, just an incredible cast. You know, I think this is one of the best casts that Marvel's ever assembled for one of their movies, and Marvel are known for getting great talent involved with their films, but this might be the best cast yet. I mean, we've got Benedict Cumberbatch in the title role as Doctor Strange, we've got Tilda Swinton, we've got Chiwetel Ejiofor, we've got Benedict Wong, Mads Mikkelsen, Rachel McAdams, just an incredible all-star cast, and they all deliver great performances. Some are bigger roles than others. Rachel McAdams and Mads Mikkelsen don't get that much screen time, they don't get that much to do. Their roles aren't as big as the others, but for me that didn't bug me because I still really liked them in the parts that they were playing. I still think they did deliver great performances. So even though they could have had more screen time, perhaps they probably could have had more to do, I thought they were great in their roles, and I thought those roles were perfectly fine as more supporting roles. And you know, Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, he was just absolutely great. You know, I always wanted Benedict Cumberbatch to be Doctor Strange. Even before the casting process began, he was my number one pick. I'm so glad they eventually settled on Benedict Cumberbatch. He really embodied that role so well. I mean, they could have had someone else like Joaquin Phoenix perhaps, but Benedict Cumberbatch, you know, even though he's got quite a distinctive look to him and he's got quite a recognisable face, he really became that character, and from the minute he was on screen, I was like, oh my god, this is Stephen Strange. He embodied him so well, that kind of arrogant genius turned superhero. And there are some kind of similarities and comparisons to Iron Man. I could see how people could think this is like, oh, they're trying to do a kind of Iron Man thing. And it is kind of like Iron Man in the way. It's a new origin story. It's an arrogant genius who ends up becoming a superhero. But, you know, other than that, it's not really like Iron Man. There are similarities, but for me, even though they're both arrogant geniuses, they're both quite different types of arrogant geniuses. You know, Tony Stark is this more witty, likeable, kind of charismatic, kind of quippy, kind of playboy kind of guy, and then Doctor Strange is you know, he tries to be funny and he likes to think he's funny, but not many people find him funny, and he's a lot more arrogant, I would say. He's a lot more like, he thinks he's the best, he thinks he's so good at his job, he's so overconfident, he's got such a big ego and really arrogant and doesn't really care about anyone. You know, even though he's great at his job and he's great at saving lives, you know, as a surgeon, he doesn't really care about the lives that he's saving, and I think Benedict Cumberbatch embodied that so well to begin with at the beginning of Doctor Strange's story. And although I love the character of Doctor Strange, what I love more than the character itself is the journey and the transformation the character goes on, and that's one of my favourite things about the origin story of Doctor Strange in the comics, and Marvel did that here, because I was thinking like, are they going to do like a full-blown origin story for Doctor Strange, or are they going to get into it quite quickly? But they do. His whole origin, we see how he goes from the arrogant neurosurgeon to becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. We see that journey and that transformation the character goes on, and I just love that because he's got such a great arc. Yes, it is a little similar to Iron Man, like I said, but I just love the character arc of Doctor Strange, and to see that character go from where he starts off at the beginning of the film to where he ends up at the end of the film. It's just so great. It was represented so well, I thought, but portrayed so well by Benedict Cumberbatch. Right? I just thought it was great. And of course, all the other members of the cast delivered terrific performances. I'm not going to go through all of them. Particular standouts, obviously Chiwetel Ejiofor is a great actor. He's just great in everything he's in. Benedict Wong is also great as well. Rachel McAdams and Mads Mikkelsen have also touched upon. They were great, but Tilda Swinton really kind of blew me away in this. She was just so great. For any of the naysayers or haters, or like, oh, why is there like a white female as the ancient one? It's like, oh, just give it a rest. Come on. What Marvel do so well is like they like getting away from racial stereotypes. They did that with the Mandarin, casting Ben Kingsley, and they're doing that here with Tilda Swinton. It's not whitewashing. It's not that at all. It's just Marvel simply getting away from that stereotypical Fu Manchu old Asian stereotype of the ancient one in the comics, and they're going for more of a different spin, a different take on the character. This is a white Celtic woman who's the ancient one now, and it makes sense as well because it's a title, it's a mantle that's passed down over generations, and Tilda Swinton was just so great in the role. You just forget that this isn't how the ancient one is in the comics, because her interpretation of that character was so good and so convincing, and she really delivered a great performance, and she's got that gravitas to her where you just buy into it. It's quite a far-fetched, over-the-top concept, that of the ancient one, this ancient mystical being that's been around for hundreds of years, but Tilda Swinton's just such a great actor, and she just really sells it, and it was really convincing, believable performance, and she even gets in on some of the action as well, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting her character just to be just the mentor role, but she really kind of goes for it in this film in terms of, she actually gets in on the action, and it was so great to see her in some physical kind of combat scenes, and it was just so awesome. You're like, wow, okay, she really is the master of the mystic arts, and it was so cool. She was so great in that role. And also I have to touch on the visuals. From a visual perspective, this film was remarkable. It was really outstanding from a visual point of view. Story-wise, it was pretty simplistic, it was pretty basic. There wasn't anything special or different or interesting or unique there. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Story-wise, it was perfectly fine, but for me, what not only saved this film, but really kind of made the film, was the fact that it was visually miraculous to look at. It was so cool and different from any other kind of Marvel movie and from any other kind of superhero movie. When you're watching this, it doesn't feel like you're watching a stereotypical, generic superhero movie, because yes, story-wise, it is pretty formulaic and pretty, uninspired from a story point of view, but from a visual perspective, they really go for it and don't hold back, and I absolutely love that. Especially the first meeting between Doctor Strange and the Ancient One, where the Ancient One essentially opens Doctor Strange's mind to these alternate dimensions, and we see all these multiple universes, the multiverse, all these different realities and these different dimensions, and it is just so incredibly cool. You think Ant-Man was kind of pushing it with the whole microverse. That was only a small little taste. Doctor Strange just really opens that world up to you, and they really go for it, and it was so cool to see. It's not just Inception city bending as it looks like in the trailers. There's an element of that for sure. There's a lot of imagery inspired from movies that are the likes of Inception and The Matrix for sure, but if anything, those movies kind of copy Doctor Strange, because Doctor Strange has been around since the 60s. There's not just city bending, there's kind of alternate dimensions, going to other realities and other, there's stuff going all crazy all over the place, and it does go a little crazy at times, and there's stuff going on all over the place, and it's maybe a little hard to follow, but I just loved it so much that they were really just going for it all out, that I really couldn't complain. I was like, this is so cool. City bending, mirror dimensions, alternate reality, it was just great. That's what I wanted to see in a Doctor Strange movie, and they really delivered. And also, this is a Marvel movie, it's a big comic book action movie, and it really delivers on the action as well. When we get to these action sequences, you're expecting something cool and something different and exciting, and they deliver it. Again, the story, it wasn't that incredible, but the action was, and when we get to these action sequences, you just forget about, anything else. You're just like, this is so incredibly cool and different and unique. And that made up for the lack of a overly kind of interesting and, different story, because it was already such a big risk as it was. Doing this kind of character with this kind of power base, telling us his origin and introducing us to this world and opening up these other possibilities or these alternate dimensions, it was already such a big risk. They needed to keep it simple and basic in terms of the story. But the action, they really go for it. They don't hold back from the visual perspective, and from the action sequences, they really go for it, and it was just so great to see. It's kind of hard to explain how cool and unique and different the action sequences are. It's really kind of like, it has to be seen to be believed, and once you've seen it you're like, wow, this is really cool. And also I've got to touch on the humour as well. One of my main worries and concerns going into Doctor Strange was that the humour was going to feel kind of forced and out of place, and I actually really liked the humour. There was only a couple of instances where it did kind of fall flat and didn't really work, but on the most part I think the humour worked really well and it added to the film. If anything, it was like an extra added bonus that kind of enhanced the film and made it even more entertaining and enjoyable. And I think the humour did work. It mostly came about from the kind of sarcastic nature of Doctor Strange, his kind of interactions with the Ancient One, and just interactions between the other characters and characters reacting to certain situations. So it was all very kind of natural humour. It wasn't stuff that just felt forced and out of place. Like I said, there was a couple of times where it didn't really work. It kind of fell flat a bit, but for the most part I really enjoyed the humour and I think it worked really well. Now getting into negatives, I've already touched upon this slightly already a few times, but the story and the structuring of the film was kind of an issue for me. I mean, it wasn't a big problem for me, because I wasn't expecting this to be the most interesting, different, unique Marvel movie from a story's perspective. I knew they were going to keep it quite simple because they needed to focus on telling us the origin story of Doctor Strange and introducing us to this world, setting up the world to us and exploring the mythology, and they do all that so incredibly well. But it was pretty simplistic and basic and generic from a story's perspective. Like I said, I was kind of okay with that because all I wanted was a great Doctor Strange movie and a great origin story for Doctor Strange, and they delivered on that. But story-wise, it really wasn't anything special. It was pretty formulaic and pretty generic. So, if you're going in expecting something remarkable from a story perspective, you probably will be a little bit let down. But if you go in like I did, wanting just a great Doctor Strange movie, a great Doctor Strange origin story, and a great introduction to this world and this mythology, then you will be really pleasantly surprised because that's what this movie gave us. However, that being said, from a structural point of view, I think this movie wasn't that strong either. For me, I think Act 1 was really great, really kind of introduced us to the character, set up that world, got us into the journey the character was going on. But for me, from the training of him training to become Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, towards the end of the film, the story and the structuring of the film kind of went a little iffy. It didn't become a complete mess or anything. It didn't fall apart. It was still worked and it was still a solid film. But from him training to become Doctor Strange, he suddenly became Doctor Strange. He had the cloak, he had the powers, and then it went one place to fight bad guys, another place to fight bad guys, another place to fight bad guys, and then the film was over. I was like, was that done as well as it could have been? I don't know. Even though structurally it kind of became a little messy in that they just went to that place to fight bad guys, then they went to that place to fight bad guys, then they went to that place to fight bad guys, and the film was over. It didn't bug me because, like I said, from a visual perspective, it was incredibly different and interesting, unique, and it was really cool to watch in terms of the action. And once the action's finally started and kicked in, you're like, oh yes, this is what I want to see. And so, the fact that the story and the structure wasn't, as great as it could have been, wasn't really that big of a problem. And finally, my last negative point is the score. I liked the score. I think the music was good, but for me, there was a particular track that recurred a few times that sounded a bit too much like the Star Trek theme. And if any of you are aware, this score in this was composed by Michael Giacchino, who was also the composer of the newer Star Trek movies. And you can tell for me it sounded a little bit too much like the Star Trek theme. I like the music, but that main theme, or what I think is the main theme that recurred a few times, it sounded almost identical to the Star Trek theme. Usually I don't mind when a particular track from a score resembles music from another film, but in this case, the Star Trek theme is great and iconic, and this kind of needed its own great iconic theme in its own right. And for me, it sounded a bit too much like the Star Trek theme. Overall, Doctor Strange isn't one of the best Marvel movies we've ever had, but what it did do so incredibly well is that it was a great introduction to the character of Doctor Strange and to this new world and this new mystical side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it delivered everything a fan of the comics and of the character would want in a Doctor Strange movie. With incredible performances from an all-star cast, awe-inspiring visuals, and really cool, interesting and unique action sequences, Doctor Strange may not be one of the best Marvel movies, but was it a great Doctor Strange film? I thought so. I'm going to give Doctor Strange 4 stars. And there we go, that wraps up my review of Marvel's Doctor Strange. Have you seen the film yet? And if so, what do you think about it? Or if not, what are you expecting of this film and what are you hoping to get from this film? Let me know down below, I'd love to know. And as always, if you like this, make sure to click subscribe to see more. But for now, I've been David O'Sullivan. I'll see you next time.